At my granddaughter's graduation ceremony, my daughter whispered in front of everyone, "She's going to embarrass us in that wheelchair." I cried quietly. The next day, I removed them all from my will. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I spent 2 hours getting ready that morning, longer than I had in months. My hands shook as I applied lipstick, the same coral shade I'd worn to every important family event for 30 years. Today was Saoirse's graduation from Berkeley, and despite everything my body had been through since the stroke 3 years ago, I was determined to be there. The wheelchair felt heavier than usual as Juniper pushed me across the campus courtyard. The California sun was warm on my face, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel proud. My granddaughter, 18 and brilliant, was graduating summa cum laude. I had helped pay for her education, just as I had for Juniper's decades earlier. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes, Juniper said, her voice tight with what I assumed was excitement. She was always anxious about timing, my daughter, always worried about appearances. We found seats in the designated wheelchair section, and I noticed how Juniper kept glancing around, her jaw clenched. She smoothed her navy dress for the 3rd time and checked her phone obsessively. "Are you looking for someone?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Just checking if Dad's family is here," she replied without looking at me. My ex-son-in-law's relatives, people who had barely acknowledged my existence even before the wheelchair. The families around us were chatting excitedly, grandparents beaming with pride, parents taking photos. I reached into my purse for my own camera, an old digital one that Saoirse had helped me learn to use last Christmas. That's when I heard her. "She's going to embarrass us in that wheelchair." The words came from directly behind me. Juniper's voice, but quieter than usual, meant to be private, meant to be heard only by whoever was sitting next to her. But in my 70 years of living, my hearing had never failed me. My hand froze halfway to my purse. The camera suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Mom, please," came another voice. A man's voice, David, Juniper's husband of 5 years. "She can hear you. She's practically deaf anyway," Juniper whispered back, but not quietly enough. "Look at how people are staring. Mrs. Henderson from the country club is 2 rows over. What is she going to think?" I felt my chest tighten. The familiar sensation that had become my constant companion since the stroke. But this wasn't a medical episode. This was something else entirely. Something that felt like drowning while sitting perfectly still. The graduation ceremony began, but I couldn't focus on the speeches or the processional music. All I could hear was my daughter's voice echoing in my head. "She's going to embarrass us." The same daughter I had raised alone after her father died when she was 12. The same daughter whose college tuition I had paid by working double shifts as a nurse. The same daughter who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, whispering that I was the bravest person she knew. When they called Saoirse's name, I managed to clap. My granddaughter walked across the stage with grace, her red hair catching the sunlight just like Juniper's used to before she started dyeing it blonde. She looked toward our section and waved, her smile so bright it made my chest ache. After the ceremony, Saoirse ran over to us, her graduation cap askew, diploma clutched in her hands. "Grandma Eileen, did you see me walk?" She knelt beside my wheelchair, her eyes shining with excitement. "I saw everything, sweetheart," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm so proud of you." Juniper stepped forward then, immediately taking control of the moment. "Let's get some photos before all the good spots are taken," she announced, already positioning herself next to Saoirse. As David took photo after photo, I noticed how Juniper kept maneuvering herself and Saoirse away from my wheelchair, making sure I was either partially hidden or completely out of frame. When other families approached to congratulate Saoirse, Juniper would subtly step in front of me, blocking their view. The drive home was torture. Saoirse rode with her boyfriend, and I was left alone in the car with Juniper and David. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, broken only by the radio playing softly in the background. I stared out the window at the passing neighborhoods, each house representing families that I imagined were happier than ours. Families where grandmothers weren't seen as embarrassments, where love didn't come with conditions. When we reached my house, Juniper helped me transfer from the car to my wheelchair with the mechanical efficiency of someone performing an unpleasant chore. Her touch was gentle enough, but there was no warmth in it. No connection. "We'll see you next week," she said, already backing toward her car. "Sersa wants to take you to lunch before she starts her summer internship." I wanted to ask if she would be joining us for that lunch, but I already knew the answer. Juniper had been finding excuses to avoid spending time with me ever since the wheelchair became a permanent fixture in my life. That night, alone in my house with only the hum of the refrigerator for company, I sat in my living room staring at the wall of family photos, pictures of Juniper's childhood, her wedding, Sersa's school events. A lifetime of memories that suddenly felt like lies. "She's going to embarrass us." The words played on repeat in my mind as I finally understood something that had been building for months. To my daughter, I was no longer her mother. I was a problem to be managed, a burden to be hidden, and tomorrow, I was going to do something about it. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through decades of memories that now felt tainted by Juniper's words. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar stretched to its breaking point to give her the life I thought she deserved. I remembered the day her father died. Juniper was 12, old enough to understand that the man who used to carry her on his shoulders would never come home again. I found her in her room that night, clutching the baseball mitt he'd bought her for her birthday just 2 months earlier. "Mom," she had whispered, "are you going to leave too?" I had held her then, stroking her hair and promising her that nothing in this world would ever take me away from her. That promise had shaped every decision I made for the next 26 years. Working double shifts at the hospital became my norm. 18-hour days that left me exhausted but determined to provide for Juniper. While other mothers attended PTA meetings and school plays, I was changing bedpans and monitoring IVs, saving every penny I could for her future. I sacrificed vacations, new clothes, dinners out with friends. My social life disappeared entirely. When Juniper was accepted to Stanford, I took out a second mortgage on the house to cover what the scholarships didn't. When she wanted to study abroad in her junior year, I picked up extra weekend shifts for 6 months to make it happen. The irony wasn't lost on me now. I had worked myself into the ground to ensure Juniper would never have to struggle the way I had. And she hadn't. She'd graduated debt-free, married a successful architect, lived in a beautiful home in Marin County. Everything I had dreamed of for her. But somewhere along the way, I had become invisible to her. The stroke had simply made that invisibility more obvious. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers clumsy with the touchscreen. It was 3:17 a.m., but I needed to hear another voice. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for someone to call, someone who might understand. The list was shorter than I remembered. Most of my old friends from the hospital had retired or moved away. The few remaining numbers belonged to people I hadn't spoken to in months. When had my world become so small? The next morning, I called my caregiver and told her I needed to go out alone. Maria protested, reminding me that Juniper had specifically instructed her never to let me drive or go anywhere unaccompanied. "Mrs. Eileen, Miss Juniper, she will be very angry with me," Maria said in her gentle accent. "You know this." "Maria," I said, looking her directly in the eye, "I'm 70 years old. I've been making my own decisions for longer than my daughter has been alive. I'm going to the bank, and I'm going alone." Something in my tone must have convinced her because she helped me into my car without further argument. The hand controls that had been installed after my stroke felt strange under my fingers, but I managed to navigate the familiar streets to First National Bank. Mr. Peterson, my financial advisor for the past 15 years, seemed surprised to see me. Most of our recent meetings had included Juniper, who had gradually taken over handling my affairs, with the excuse that it was too stressful for me to manage alone. "Mrs. Murphy," he said, standing to greet me as his assistant helped position my wheelchair near his desk. "How can I help you today?" "I need to know exactly what my financial situation is," I said. "Everything. The house, the savings accounts, the investments, all of it." He looked confused. Didn't we go over this last month when Juniper was here? She said you were concerned about your long-term care costs. I felt my stomach tighten. Juniper was here? About my finances? Yes, she had your power of attorney paperwork. She wanted to understand your assets in case you needed to move to a care facility. He paused, studying my face. She didn't mention this to you? Power of attorney. I remembered signing those papers 2 years ago when I was first discharged from the hospital after my stroke. Juniper had explained that it was just a precaution, something to help her handle things if I was ever unable to make decisions for myself. What exactly did she ask about? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. Mr. Peterson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Well, she was particularly interested in the value of your home and whether you had considered selling it. She mentioned that maintaining such a large property might be becoming burdensome for you. My house. The 3-bedroom Craftsman in Berkeley that I had bought with my late husband 40 years ago. The house where Juniper had taken her first steps, lost her first tooth, brought her first boyfriend to meet us. The house I had nearly lost twice to pay for her education, but had fought to keep because it represented everything we had built together. Did she mention anything about my will? I asked. Mr. Peterson's expression grew even more uncomfortable. She asked about the process for updating estate documents. Said you had been talking about making some changes. I hadn't been talking about making changes. I hadn't talked to Juniper about my will in years. I'd like to see all my accounts, I said firmly, and I'd like to know exactly what authority the power of attorney gives her. As Mr. Peterson pulled up my financial records on his computer, I began to understand the full scope of what was happening. Juniper hadn't just been managing my affairs. She had been preparing for my eventual demise, calculating my worth like I was already gone. The house was worth $1.2 million in the current market. My retirement savings and investments totaled another $400,000. A significant inheritance for someone who apparently saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment. Mrs. Murphy, Mr. Peterson said carefully, if you're having concerns about your daughter's involvement in your finances, we should discuss your options. I looked at him, this man who had helped me navigate the financial challenges of widowhood and single parenthood for 15 years. He had never seen me as helpless before. Even after the stroke, even in this wheelchair, I was still the same woman who had built this life from nothing. I want to make some changes to my will, I said, and I want to revoke the power of attorney. His eyebrows raised slightly. Are you sure about this? It's a significant decision. I thought about Juniper's voice at the graduation ceremony. She's going to embarrass us. I thought about her meeting with Mr. Peterson behind my back, calculating the value of my life while I was still living it. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. As I left the bank that afternoon, a copy of my new will in my purse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Control. For the first time since the stroke, I was making decisions about my own life. Juniper was about to learn that embarrassing your mother comes with consequences she never saw coming. The meeting with my lawyer was scheduled for Tuesday morning, 3 days after my revelation at the bank. I chose Gerald Hoffman, not because he was the most expensive attorney in town, but because he had handled my original will 20 years ago and understood the weight of what I was about to do. His office hadn't changed much since my last visit. The same mahogany furniture, the same law books lining the walls, the same serious atmosphere that made you think twice before making impulsive decisions. But there was nothing impulsive about what I was doing. Eileen, Gerald said, rising from behind his desk as his secretary wheeled me in. It's been too long, though I have to say, I was surprised by your call. I imagine you were. I positioned my wheelchair across from his desk, the same spot where I had sat decades ago planning for a future I thought would include a grateful daughter. I need to make some changes to my estate. Gerald had aged well into his 70s, his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him an distinguished air. He had been practicing law longer than Juniper had been alive, and I trusted his discretion completely. Before we begin, he said, settling back into his chair, I want to make sure you've thought this through carefully. Estate changes can have lasting consequences, especially when family relationships are involved. I pulled out the folder I had prepared, filled with bank statements, property assessments, and a handwritten list of my wishes. I've been thinking about this for longer than you might imagine. The truth was, I had been considering changes to my will since the stroke, but not for the reasons Gerald might assume. Initially, I had wanted to make things easier for Juniper, to ensure she wouldn't have to deal with complicated legal processes while grieving. I had planned to simplify everything, maybe even transfer some assets to her while I was still alive. That was before I understood how she really saw me. I want to remove Juniper as my primary beneficiary, I said, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was saying. The house, the savings accounts, the investments, everything. I want it all to go to the Elder Care Foundation. Gerald's pen stopped moving across his legal pad. Eileen, that's a substantial change. Your estate is worth over $1.5 million. Are you certain about this? I've never been more certain of anything. I leaned forward in my wheelchair, meeting his gaze directly. But I want to make a provision for Saoirse, a trust fund for her education and future, but one that Juniper can't access or control. For the next hour, we worked through the details. Saoirse would receive $200,000 in a trust that would pay for her graduate school and help her start her adult life. The remainder, nearly $1.4 million, would go to the Elder Care Foundation, an organization that provided support and advocacy for seniors who had been abandoned or mistreated by their families. This will be quite a shock to your daughter, Gerald warned as he made notes. Have you considered discussing this with her first? I thought about Juniper's voice at the graduation ceremony, the way she had maneuvered to keep me out of family photos, her secret meetings with my financial advisor. Some conversations are better had after the fact. As Gerald drew up the paperwork, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. This wasn't the future I had imagined when I held Juniper as a baby, when I worked those double shifts to pay for her education, when I walked her down the aisle at her wedding, but it was the future her choices had created. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the very money I had sacrificed to earn, the assets I had accumulated through decades of careful planning and hard work, to teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. That evening, I sat in my living room with the new will locked safely in my desk drawer. The house felt different somehow, as if the walls themselves knew that everything had changed. I had dinner alone, as I did most nights, reheating leftover casserole that Maria had prepared earlier in the week. My phone rang just as I was finishing my meal. Juniper's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice carrying that artificially cheerful tone she used when she wanted something. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." The endearment felt strange on my tongue now, but old habits were hard to break. Good. Listen, David and I were talking, and we think it might be time to start looking at some assisted living facilities for you. Nothing immediate, of course, but we want to be prepared. There it was, the real reason for the call. Assisted living? Well, Mom, this house is so big, and with your mobility issues, we just worry about you being alone so much. There are some lovely places in Marin County close to us. You'd have people to talk to, activities, professional care. I closed my eyes, understanding finally hitting me like a physical blow. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about convenience. Get the embarrassing mother tucked away somewhere safe, somewhere she couldn't be seen struggling with a wheelchair at important events. "Have you been talking to Mr. Peterson about selling my house?" I asked quietly. There was a pause, long enough to confirm what I already knew. "Mom, we're just trying to plan ahead. The real estate market is really good right now, and if you're going to move anyway, I'm not moving anywhere, Juniper. Mom, be reasonable. You can't live in that big house forever. What if you fall? What if you have another stroke? Maria can't be there 24 hours a day." I listened to her rational arguments, her practical concerns, her logical reasoning for why I should give up my independence and my home. Everything she said made perfect sense, except for one crucial element. None of it was really about me. "I'll think about it," I said finally, knowing I had no intention of thinking about it at all. "Great! I'll start making some calls tomorrow. Maybe set up a few tours for next week. After we hung up, I wheeled myself to the front window and looked out at the neighborhood where I had lived for 4 decades. The oak tree in my front yard that Juniper used to climb as a child. The sidewalk where she had learned to ride her bike. The porch where she had posed for prom pictures. This house held every important memory of our life together, and she was ready to sell it without a second thought. I reached for my phone and called Gerald's office, leaving a message on his after-hours voicemail. "Gerald, it's Eileen Murphy. I want to add one more provision to the will. If Juniper tries to have me declared incompetent or moves me to a care facility against my wishes, I want the trust for Saoirse reduced to $50,000, with the rest going to the foundation. I want her to understand that some decisions have consequences." As I hung up the phone, I realized that for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't thinking like a victim. I was thinking like a woman who still had choices to make. And I was just getting started. 3 weeks had passed since I changed my will, and Juniper's assisted living campaign had intensified. She called daily with updates about facilities she had toured, brochures she wanted to show me, waiting lists she had put my name on without asking. Each conversation felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. I had been careful to leave the new will document visible on my kitchen table Tuesday morning, knowing it was the day Juniper came to take me to my doctor's appointment. I positioned it just so, next to my coffee cup and reading glasses, as if I had been reviewing it over breakfast. She arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, as punctual as always. I watched from my wheelchair as she bustled around my kitchen, gathering my medications and checking that I had my insurance card. "Mom, you really need to start keeping these pills organized better," she said, shaking the bottles. "This is exactly the kind of thing that would be so much easier in assisted living. They handle all the medication management for you." I said nothing, waiting. It took her exactly 4 minutes to notice the legal documents on the table. "What's this?" she asked, her tone shifting from lecturing to curious. "Some paperwork I've been reviewing," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. She picked up the will, and I watched her face change as she read. First confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like physical pain. "Mom," her voice was barely a whisper. "What is this?" "It's my new will." "Sweetheart." The color drained from her face as she continued reading. I had made sure Gerald included clear language that couldn't be misinterpreted. Juniper Hayes Murphy was to receive nothing from her mother's estate upon said mother's death, with all assets to be distributed to the Elder Care Foundation of Northern California, with the exception of a trust fund established for Saoirse Murphy Chen. "You've left everything to charity?" Her voice cracked on the word charity, as if it were something obscene. "I've left everything to an organization that helps people like me." She sank into the chair across from me, the will trembling in her hands. "People like you? Mom, what are you talking about?" "People whose families see them as burdens. People who are embarrassing to be around." The recognition hit her like a slap. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she could form words. "Mom, I didn't mean..." "You meant every word, Juniper. At Saoirse's graduation, when you thought I couldn't hear you properly, she's going to embarrass us in that wheelchair." Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but I felt no satisfaction in them. If anything, they made me sadder. I was just stressed about the ceremony. You know how I get when there are a lot of people around. "This isn't about one comment at one event," I said, my voice remaining steady. "This is about who you've become. This is about secret meetings with my financial advisor, discussions about selling my house, putting me on waiting lists for facilities I never agreed to consider." She was crying openly now, mascara creating dark tracks down her face. "I was trying to help you. I was trying to plan for your future. You were trying to manage me like a problem that needed solving." For several minutes, we sat in silence. Juniper clutching the will, me watching the woman I had raised and wondering when I had lost her. Outside, I could hear children playing in the park across the street, their laughter a sharp contrast to the heavy atmosphere in my kitchen. "Change it back," she said finally, her voice hard now. "Mom, you have to change it back. I don't have to do anything. This is crazy. You're not thinking clearly. The stroke affected your judgment, and you're making decisions you'll regret." There it was, the nuclear option, questioning my mental competency. I had been expecting this. "Gerald Hoffman drew up this will, Juniper. the same attorney who handled your father's estate and mine for 20 years. He spent 2 hours with me, asked dozens of questions, had me sign affidavits confirming my mental state. Good luck convincing anyone that a woman who built $1 million estate while raising you alone suddenly became incompetent at 70. Her tears had stopped, replaced by something colder, something calculating. You're punishing me for trying to take care of you. I'm protecting myself from someone who sees caring for me as a burden. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Fine. You want to throw away 40 years of being my mother? You want to give away everything Dad worked for? Everything you built? Fine. Your father would be ashamed of the woman you've become. The words hung in the air between us like a curse. Juniper's face went white, then red, then white again. How dare you, she whispered. How dare you say that to me? He loved me unconditionally, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. He never once made me feel like I was an embarrassment or a burden. If he were alive today, he would be taking care of me himself, not shopping around for someone else to do it. Juniper grabbed her purse from the counter, her movements sharp and angry. Don't call me when you fall and there's no one to help you. Don't call me when you're lonely and realize you've destroyed the only family you have. I won't need to call you, I said quietly. I've already destroyed the only family I had. She slammed the front door so hard that the windows rattled. I heard her car start in the driveway, the engine revving louder than necessary, tires squealing as she backed out onto the street. I sat alone in my kitchen, the will still lying on the table where she had dropped it. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but clean somehow, like the air after a thunderstorm. My phone rang within an hour. David's number. Eileen, he said, his voice careful and measured. Juniper told me what happened. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. There's no misunderstanding, David. Look, I know she can be intense sometimes. She's just worried about you. We both are. Maybe we could all sit down and talk this through. I almost laughed. Even David, with his architect's mind that understood structural integrity and load-bearing walls, couldn't see that the foundation of our family had been cracking for years. David, I appreciate that you're trying to fix this, but some things can't be repaired. They can only be rebuilt from scratch. Eileen, please, she's your daughter. Saoirse is your granddaughter. Don't let pride destroy your family. Pride, as if standing up for my own dignity after decades of sacrifice was somehow selfish. My family destroyed itself, I said. I'm just acknowledging what already happened. That evening, alone in my house with the new will secured in my safe, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace, not happiness exactly, but the absence of the constant anxiety that had become my companion since the stroke. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't waiting for someone to decide what was best for me. I wasn't wondering when the next conversation about my limitations would happen. I wasn't bracing myself for the next casual cruelty disguised as practical concern. I had taken back control of my life, and it felt like breathing again. The war began in earnest the following week. Juniper's first move was to call Dr. Martinez, my neurologist, requesting a meeting to discuss concerns about my mother's decision-making capacity. When that failed to produce the results she wanted, she contacted Adult Protective Services, claiming I was being financially exploited by unscrupulous advisors. The social worker who came to my house was a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Patricia Chen. She sat across from me in my living room, her clipboard balanced on her knees, asking questions that felt like a test I hadn't studied for. Mrs. Murphy, can you tell me what year it is? 2024. And who is the current president? I answered each question with growing irritation. Yes, I knew where I lived. Yes, I could remember what I had for breakfast. Yes, I understood the value of money. The cognitive assessment was thorough and, ultimately, completely in my favor. Mrs. Murphy, Patricia said as she packed up her forms, I want you to know that you have every right to make decisions about your own estate. Your daughter seems genuinely concerned about you, but concern doesn't override your autonomy. After she left, I called Gerald to let him know what had happened. His response was exactly what I had expected from a man who had spent 50 years practicing elder law. This is more common than you might think, Eileen. Adult children often can't distinguish between caring for their parents and controlling them. The good news is that you've documented everything properly. The will is ironclad. 3 days later, Saoirse appeared at my door. I hadn't seen my granddaughter since the graduation, and the sight of her standing on my porch with tears in her eyes nearly broke my resolve. She looked so much like Juniper had at 18, all sharp angles and fierce determination, but with a gentleness that her mother had lost somewhere along the way. "Grandma," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "can we talk?" I let her in, of course. How could I not? She was the one person in this entire mess who had done nothing wrong except have the misfortune of being born into a family that had forgotten how to love each other properly. She sat on my couch, the same spot where her mother used to curl up as a child, and looked at me with those serious green eyes that reminded me so much of my late husband. "Mom told me about the will," she said finally. "I imagine she did. She's been crying for 3 days straight. She thinks you hate her." I felt my chest tighten. "I don't hate her, sweetheart, but I can't pretend anymore that things are okay between us." Saoirse was quiet for a long moment, picking at the throw pillow in her lap. "She told me what she said at my graduation, about the wheelchair." My stomach dropped. "She told you?" "Not exactly. I heard her talking to Dad about it. She was trying to explain why you changed the will, and she said she might have made some comments that hurt your feelings." Saoirse looked up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Grandma, is that really why you did this? Because of something she said when she was stressed? How do you explain to an 18-year-old that it wasn't about one comment, but about a pattern of behavior that had been building for years? How do you tell someone you love that their mother had gradually stopped seeing you as a person worth respecting? It's complicated, honey. Everything is complicated when you're an adult," she said, with the wisdom that sometimes emerges from youth. "But some things are still just wrong." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I was sure Juniper had employed. But Saoirse had always been her own person, even as a child, strong-willed like her mother, but with a moral compass that pointed true north. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. She was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing her words carefully. "I think," she said finally, "that Mom forgot that you're still a person. Not just her mother, not just my grandmother, but Eileen Murphy, who worked her whole life to take care of everyone else." The simple recognition of my personhood, spoken by this remarkable young woman, hit me harder than any insult ever had. "But I also think," she continued, "that she's scared, really scared. Not about money, not about inheritance, but about losing you. And scared people do stupid things." I reached over and took her hand, marveling at how much wisdom could fit into such a young person. "What would you do if you were me?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know that I love you both, and I don't want to lose either of you, because pride got in the way of forgiveness." After Saoirse left, I sat in my living room as darkness fell outside. Her words echoed in my mind, mixing with memories of Juniper as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman starting her own family. Somewhere in those memories was the daughter who used to hold my hand during scary movies, who called me every day during her first week of college, who cried when she told me she was pregnant because she was so happy I would be a grandmother. But those memories were shadowed by more recent ones. The gradual erosion of respect, the increasing impatience with my limitations, the casual cruelties that had become our normal way of interacting. That night, I called Juniper. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting by the phone. "Mom? I want you to understand something," I said without preamble. "This isn't about money. This isn't about revenge. This is about dignity." I heard her take a shaky breath. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about what I said at the graduation. I was stressed and worried about appearances, and I said something terrible. But you have to know that I don't really feel that way." "Don't you?" The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours. She started, then stopped. "I don't know how to do this, Mom. I don't know how to take care of you without feeling like I'm losing myself in the process." It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. "I never asked you to lose yourself, Juniper. I just asked you not to lose me." She was crying again. I could hear it in her breathing. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if it can be fixed, I said, and meant it. But it can't get worse than it already is. What do you want from me? The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? An apology? A promise that things would change? A guarantee that she would never again see me as an embarrassment? I want you to see me, I said finally. Not as a problem to be solved or a burden to be managed. Just as your mother, who loves you but won't be treated like she doesn't matter. You do matter, she whispered. Then prove it. We ended the call without resolution, but for the first time in months, I felt like we had at least been honest with each other. Whether that honesty would be enough to bridge the chasm between us remained to be seen. But at least now we both understood exactly where we stood. 8 months have passed since that conversation, and I'm writing this from my own living room, in the house that Juniper once wanted to sell, surrounded by the life I chose to keep living on my own terms. The changes didn't happen overnight. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly, like bone healing after a fracture. But Juniper has been trying. Really trying in ways that matter. She stopped talking about assisted living facilities. She stopped making decisions about my life without consulting me first. Most importantly, she stopped treating my wheelchair like a source of shame and started treating it like what it actually is, a tool that helps me maintain my independence. The turning point came 3 months ago at Saoirse's birthday dinner. We were at a restaurant, and when the hostess tried to seat us at a table tucked away in the back corner, clearly thinking the wheelchair would be less conspicuous there, Juniper spoke up. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "My mother would prefer a table by the window." It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. For the first time in years, someone was advocating for my preferences instead of managing my image. We've had difficult conversations since then. Real conversations about the years after the stroke, about how overwhelmed Juniper felt trying to help me while managing her own life, about how abandoned I felt when that help began to feel like management rather than love. "I think I was so afraid of losing you to another stroke that I started treating you like you were already gone," she admitted during one of our talks. "Like you weren't really my mother anymore, just this fragile thing I had to protect." I understood that fear better than I wanted to admit. The stroke had changed me, had taken away some of my independence and forced me to rely on others in ways I never had before. But I was still me, still the woman who had raised her, still someone with opinions and preferences and the right to make my own choices. The will remains unchanged, not out of spite, but because I've learned something important about myself over these past months. I don't need anyone to take care of me financially. I need them to take care of me emotionally, to treat me with the respect and dignity that every human being deserves. Saoirse visits every Sunday now. She brings her laundry and we fold it together while she tells me about her classes, her internship, her plans for graduate school. Sometimes Juniper joins us and we cook dinner together in my kitchen, 3 generations of women who are learning how to love each other without conditions. Last week, Saoirse asked me if I would teach her how to drive with hand controls. "Why would you want to learn that?" I asked. She shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "Because someday I might need to know. And because I want to understand what your world is like." It struck me then that this 18-year-old understood something that had taken her mother 45 years to learn, that adapting to someone's limitations isn't about making them feel normal. It's about making them feel valued. Gerald calls occasionally to check on me, to make sure I don't want to make any changes to my estate planning. I always tell him the same thing. The will stands as written, not because I want to punish Juniper, but because I want to protect myself. The money will go to people who need it, and that knowledge gives me more peace than any inheritance ever could. I've started volunteering with the Elder Care Foundation, the organization that will eventually receive my estate. Once a week, Maria drives me to their offices, where I answer phones and help other seniors navigate the complex emotions of aging in a family that doesn't always understand their needs. It's given me perspective on how common my experience really is, and how lucky I am that my story has had the chance to change direction. Yesterday, Juniper brought me a photo album she had made. Pictures of our family through the years, but arranged differently than I expected. Instead of the usual progression from childhood to adulthood, she had organized it by moments of connection. Me reading to her when she was sick, her helping me in the garden as a teenager, the two of us at her college graduation, both crying with pride. "I wanted to remember who we were to each other," she said as we flipped through the pages together, "before everything got so complicated." The last photo in the album was from Saoirse's graduation, but not one of the formal shots we had taken afterward. This was a candid picture that David had captured during the ceremony, of me clapping as Saoirse walked across the stage. My face was radiant with pride, and you couldn't even tell I was in a wheelchair unless you looked carefully at the bottom of the frame. "I've been carrying around shame about your wheelchair for 3 years, Juniper said quietly. "But looking at this picture, I realized the only person who should be ashamed is me. Not because you need a wheelchair, but because I let that change how I saw you." I study that photograph often now. In it, I see a woman who has lived through loss and adaptation and family conflict, but who still found joy in celebrating someone she loves. I see someone who refused to let other people's discomfort with her limitations become her own shame. I see myself, whole and valuable and worthy of respect, exactly as I am. The house is quiet tonight, but it's a peaceful quiet. Tomorrow, Saoirse will come for Sunday dinner. Juniper might join us, or she might not, and either choice will be okay. Maria will arrive Monday morning with her usual cheerful energy, ready to help me tackle another week of living independently. My wheelchair sits beside my bed, ready for another day of taking me wherever I decide I want to go. It's not a symbol of limitation anymore. It's a symbol of adaptation, of refusing to let circumstances define my worth. I changed my will 8 months ago to protect myself from a daughter who had forgotten how to see me as a person. I haven't changed it back, and I probably never will, but I no longer need that protection because Juniper has remembered something important. I am not her burden to bear. I am her mother to love, and that has made all the difference in both of our worlds. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.